So who we have with us right now is Dr. Robert Kodosky. Dr. Robert Kodosky is the Dean of History and is an author on Tuskegee in Philadelphia, Rising to the Challenge. He will be speaking towards the end of our talk about his book and his research. We also have with us right now Dr. Eugene Richardson Jr., and he is an original Tuskegee Airman. Mel Payne will be coming back on, and he is the board president of the Greater Philadelphia chapter of Tuskegee Airmen.
I just wanted to welcome everyone. As Kristen said, my name is Melvin Payne. I'm the president of the Greater Philadelphia chapter Tuskegee Airmen. And with me this evening is Dr. Eugene Richardson, original Tuskegee Airman, who will be doing the bulk of the presentation. And we also have Dr. Robert Kodosky, who is the Dean of History at Westchester University. Dr. Kodosky with us, and we'll talk a little bit at the end of the program about the work that we did in writing a book about Tuskegee Airmen and women from the Greater Philadelphia area. So with that being said, we can get started. And I can talk a little bit about what we do as an organization. Because Tuskegee Airmen, many people don't realize that we have a three-pronged mission that the organization focuses on in order to sustain the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. So we do presentations like this, and we have other exhibits that we do. But the other thing that we do is, and our major focus is on youth. So in order to help youth with their careers moving forward, we provide opportunities for flight for students, young people, so they can actually go and experience what it's like to fly with a pilot in an airplane. That's usually 1 to 4 young people in a small Cessna type airplane, that they can experience that. We are in developing a drone training program with understanding that the new technologies that are coming out will be directed toward drones in use in science, in architecture, and many other fields. And we provide opportunities for young people to experience other STEM-related careers. We'll talk about mostly tonight what's done in aviation, the history, and some of the people that worked in aviation. But Tuskegee Airmen consisted of a centrally located place where they had to have all of the functions that were allowed to make it operate. So nursing, cooks, mechanics, and Dr. Richardson will talk through some of that. So it's more than just the aviation field, although we promote the aviation field because of the fact that there is a dire need for pilots and mechanics today. So we help promote those types of things, which is something that most people don't realize that we do. Last year, we gave out $9,000 worth of scholarships. So we provide scholarships for individuals that want to go on and pursue careers in the aviation field that encompass more than just the pilots.
Okay, Tuskegee Airmen. The name Tuskegee is in Alabama. It's a school that was established in 1811 for the education of research. It means Cherokee town. Tuskegee is the only place in the United States where men of color could be trained to be pilots during World War II. Most people think that the early black pilots were Tuskegee Airmen only, but it just so happens this is the first combat pilot, Eugene Bullard. Now we had to sue the military to be pilots in World War II. But Eugene Bullard was a pilot in World War I, but he flew for the French Air Force. Just so happens that Bullard's home was in Columbus, Georgia. And his grandfather told him there's a country across the ocean called France where black men are treated the same as white men. And given all the racist stuff that was going on in Columbus, Georgia, Bullard was quite anxious to go to experience this country in France. So Bullard ran away from home. He left Columbus, Georgia, and he had quite an adventure getting to France. But he did get there. He finally got there after a couple of years, and he got there just as World War I was breaking out. And he was told that honorable Frenchmen joined the military. So Eugene Bullard wanted to be as close to a Frenchman as possible, so he joined the military, and he became a gunner. But he was wounded during the Battle of Verdun. While he was in the hospital recuperating from his wounds, he learned that you could be the gunner in the back seat of an airplane. And there was a guy in the back seat with a machine gun, and he'd be shooting at other planes that came near. So Eugene Bullard became a gunner in the French Air Force. And he also learned, hey, listen, you can go to flight school. You could fly from the front seat. So Bullard went to Avard, went to the flight school at Avard in France, and became a pilot. He flew a Spot airplane. This picture back of him is a Spot airplane. He flew a Spot, and he was credited with shooting down two airplanes. After the war, there were a lot of surplus airplanes, and a lot of people were buying airplanes. And just as we would perhaps go for a drive on Sunday, then they would use these airplanes to go fly around on Sundays. Well, girls want to do everything that the guys do. So this young lady, Bessie Coleman, she wanted to fly. Her home was in just out south of Dallas, Texas. But she got tired of chopping cotton and scrubbing floors, so she went to Chicago for a better job opportunity. And in Chicago, she got a job as a manicurist. And she would, of course, talk to her customers. And the one customer she talked to was the publisher of a newspaper. And she told him that she wanted her grand name was to be a pilot. He said, "Why don't you do what Bullard did? Go to France and learn to fly." And well, Bessie did that. She saved up money, learned some French, and in 1921, Bessie went to France and learned to fly. Here's a picture of Bessie in her flying outfit. Up in the right-hand corner, the picture that you see is it's just a headshot of Bessie. That was actually a U.S. stamp that was published in 1925. The government published a stamp, and Bessie was featured on that stamp. If you can see the whole picture, you can see that it was long ago because that stamp was only 29 cents. Today, they're probably about twice that much. After World War I, well, at the time of World War I, there was a very limited number of men of color in the military. But people felt that there should be a representative number of men of color in the military. And one person that was very strong in our corner was Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt went to Tuskegee, and she saw that men were flying. Well, the notion then was that men of color did not have the intelligence or the skill or the courage to be military pilots. So there were very few, but Mrs. Roosevelt went to Tuskegee for a couple of reasons. And she said, they told me black men couldn't fly, but I see you fly here and I want to fly with one of you. So this, as a picture, top picture, you see Mrs. Roosevelt is in the back seat of an airplane being flown by a man of color. And this guy's name was Charles Alfred Anderson. He flew Mrs. Roosevelt around the field for about half hour or so. And she was very, very surprised and happy with her ride with Charles Anderson. Now, an interesting thing about Charles Anderson, if you're going to tell the story of Tuskegee Airmen, there's so many guys that were involved in things at Tuskegee. Well, Charles Alfred Anderson, believe it or not, have taught himself to fly. He became the chief instructor at Tuskegee, and he's the person that gave Mrs. Roosevelt a ride around the field. So Mrs. Roosevelt, when she went back home, she told her husband, look, these men can fly and they want to fly. You got to do something to get more men of color in the air. And one young man actually sued the Army for a chance to fly. And with that lawsuit, they said, okay, we'll have a squadron for black pilots. So Squadron 99 will be for black pilots. And Tuskegee was selected to be the place for the flying training. Number one, because the climate was conducive to flying. And also there was experience. They had experience of men flying and teaching men to fly. So Tuskegee got a contract. The 66th Army Air Corps Contract Flying School, primary school, was established at Tuskegee at a place called Moton Field. The field was named after the second or third president of Tuskegee, Usa Moton. So Moton Field is where we got our first experience in flying airplanes. And that's where I had my first solo in a Boeing 17. It's two-wing airplane, two cockpits, and the instructor was up front. The students sat in the back. There's a picture of myself sitting in the back seat of an airplane with the instructor up front. And those two guys are just having an experience of seeing. It's like to crank that thing to get it started. Now, they started flying training in July of 41. In July, they actually started flying training. It took about a year to go through the flight program. And, December 7, 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. The following day, Roosevelt declared war on Japan and Germany. So now in 41, our guys are at 41, we're at war. And a year later, in August of 42, enough guys had finished training in order to establish Squadron 99. But it just happens that with the racism that even existed then in the Army, none of the commanders in Europe or the Pacific would accept a black squadron. So the men had been trained, they were training, and they were anxious to go overseas and fight for the country. But as I told you, none of the commanders would accept a black squadron. The guys were training the airplane with the star on the side of it, is a P-40. And the guys were doing an awful lot of training and flying the P-40. And they were anxious to go into combat. And now you see the group of men that made up Squadron 99. In the center of the first row of that photograph is the guy who was the commander of the group. His name was Benjamin Oliver Davis. Davis was a West Point graduate. And even after finishing West Point, they did not consider him sufficient for pilot training in the Army. But the squadron did get a chance to go into combat, and Davis was had the highest rank, so he became the squadron commander, Benjamin Oliver Davis Jr. His father was the first black military junior. President Roosevelt appointed his father to the rank of brigadier general. It took a while. Well, it was in July of 43 when the squadron finally got an assignment to go into combat in Europe. So they were sent to North Africa. You know, Mussolini had thrown in with Hitler. So between Hitler and Mussolini, they had pretty much conquered, they controlled pretty much most of Europe. And of course, Rommel, you heard of Rommel, the Desert Fox. He was the commander of German forces in North Africa. Our guys were sent to North Africa, and they're flying P-40s. And the one picture near the bottom says First Blood. Well, a guy named Charles Hall was the first African American to shoot down a German plane. And that boosted the morale up tremendously. Well, now after they finally chased the Germans out of North Africa, the Allies invaded Italy through the port of Anzio. Anzio is about 30 miles south of Rome. And the 99th was given the job of patrolling the skies over Anzio to keep the Germans from interfering with our interfering with the invasion. Now over Anzio, in a week's time, our guys shot down 18 airplanes. They shot down 18 German airplanes. Well, it could have been some Italian, but 18 enemy airplanes were shot down by our guys flying P-40s. They see that our guys can pretty good pilots. So they said, "Well, look, we need protection for the bombers." The Allies were flying B-17s and B-24s over Europe. Now the British were flying at night. The British would do the bombing at night. And of course, they do it at night, so they can't be seen. But the Allies figured they could do a better job of bombing if they bombed during the daytime. But now if you bomb during the daytime, the enemy can see you, and of course, the enemy fighters can come up and give the bombers a rough time. Plus, they can ground fire. It's more effective during the daytime. Well, each of those bombers, each B-17 and B-24 carried a crew of 10. So if a bomber went down, 10 guys could meet their fate. Well, one Thursday, believe it or not, 60 bombers were shot down. That's referred to as Black Thursday. 60 bombers went down. And there are 10 guys in each bomber, so that arithmetic gives you some horrible numbers. Well, they asked Colonel Davis if his guys would come over and protect the bombers. So Davis readily agreed to that. Now, the guys were interested in getting high numbers of individual victories. But Davis said, nope, the most important thing is for us to protect the bombers so that they can destroy the enemy's supplies and end this war quicker. And he said, it's much easier, it makes more sense for you to stay with the bombers and get them back home. And if you consider the arithmetic, one fighter plane, you shoot down a fighter plane and you shoot down one guy. But if you let a fighter plane shoot down a bomber, then you lost 10 guys. So it's most important that you stay with the bombers. And as a matter of fact, Colonel Davis had some dire punishment for guys that left the bombers. In the course of a year, the black pilots shot down 112 enemy aircraft. In the course of a year, our guys became actually the 332nd Fighter Group. They had Davis go back to the States and train 3 additional squadrons. So now we have the 99th, Squadron 99, Squadron 100, 301, and Squadron 302. So now there are 4 squadrons, and those 4 squadrons made up the 332nd Fighter Group. And as I told you, as I mentioned earlier, they shot down 112 enemy aircraft. They flew missions as far north as Berlin. Our guys were stationed in southern Italy, a place called Ramatelli, which is well, we call it the spur on Italy. But at any rate, the longest mission was to Berlin. That mission lasted. Well, it was a hell of a long mission, up and back. They were only supposed to take the guys halfway, but the squadron that was supposed to take them the rest of the way to Berlin, those guys got lost or something, and the Colonel Davis stayed with the bombers and took them all the way up to Berlin and back. Now, each squadron has a distinctive painting on the rudder and also on the nose cone, and it makes it easier for you to distinguish who your guys are. And they decided to paint the tails red. So our guys were known as the Red Tail, and the bomber guys learned to love the Red Tail guys that had the reputation of taking you on your mission, taking you to the target, and bringing you back home. So the bomber guys referred to them as Red Tail Angels. Now, a couple of years ago, there was a movie. George Lucas spent $93 million to make the movie Red Tails, and you can probably rent it today at one of the. You might even be able to go to YouTube and find it today. Red Tails. Our guys were flying P-51s with the tails painted red, and became pretty real famous guys. Now, Colonel Davis was the commander, and the bomber guys kept asking for the Red Tails. So Colonel Davis named his airplane by request. You know, then the guys painted a whole lot of different stuff on the nose of the airplane. But on Colonel Davis, for him, his airplane, he had the words by request. Now, on this large picture that you see here, there's a picture of Bugs Bunny with a shotgun. Now, I don't know whose airplane that was. They had Bugs Bunny with a shotgun. These are pictures of the different airplanes that our guys flew. Our guys flew P-39s, P-40s, P-47s, and P-51s. There's a group picture here. This is my class picture, class 45A, and yours truly is in the top or the far left of the top row, beside the P-40. Now, in every class, some of the guys wanted to fly twin-engine aircraft. So on the left side is a picture of a group of guys, and they're in front of a B-25. A B-25 had 2 engines. And then the more daring, raunchy guys wanted to fly fighter planes. So in the upper right-hand corner is a picture of a group of guys with a P-40. They became eventually P-51 pilots. In the center are fellows beside B-25, TU-101 was a B-25. And these are the guys that flew, some of the guys that flew the B-25s. Now, we also had bombardiers and navigators. The bombers, of course, had navigators, and the bombers also had bombardiers. So along with pilots, there were navigators and bombardiers. So men of color were using all the different skills of the flying experience. Oh, here, these two little ladies here. Those, can't forget the ladies. Back in the 30s, here's a group of ladies that were flying airplanes during the 30s. One lady was a teacher. I can't tell which one was the teacher. One lady was a teacher, and she bought an airplane for the group to fly. The two ladies in the bottom of this frame, Janet Bragg. She wanted they wouldn't let even women of color fly airplanes, but Janet Bragg was a commercial pilot. She wanted to fly with the Wasp. During World War II, there were about 1,100 white women who flew all the planes that the men flew. They were known as WASPs, Women's Army Auxiliary Pilots. And Janet Bragg wanted to get in that group, but they, of course, wouldn't take a lady of color. The picture on the bottom, the lady with the white helmet, well, her name is Willa Brown. She and her husband had a flying school in Chicago, and she taught a lot of the guys that taught us were taught by Willa Brown. She was a very famous lady, really the most gorgeous thing you wanted to see. Just an angel. She had wings. She flew. She had wings. You consider her to be an angel. This is the record. Now, the movie I told you about, the movie Red Tails, they did not write a script for that movie. They simply took our combat record. They took the combat record and used that as the basis for the movie Red Tails. It became a very famous movie and became a famous. That's when we started getting publicity when that movie came out, and that's when the world learned that there were these guys were flying combat planes during World War II. Well, as I tell you, as you see, women got into the whole thing. She's a two-star general. Marceline Harris was a two-star general. After desegregation, there were women in many of the occupations. Things were advanced to the point where the very first female to obtain the rank of four-star admiral was a woman of color, Michelle Howard. Michelle Howard obtained the rank of four-star admiral, and she was the very first female to obtain that rank. That was after, of course, 1948, when President Harry Truman issued an Executive Order 8891, which stopped all segregation in the military. And we received the Congressional Gold Medal. And on the back of that medal, it says that outstanding combat record inspired revolutionary reform in the armed services. And that reform referred to the desegregation order that President Harry Truman signed. And since then, there was no more discrimination in the armed services. This is a picture of yours truly on the right in the blue jacket, and my son on the left in the white shirt. He's a captain of a 777. The 777 was we carried a crew. It carried 80 some passengers, plus the crew. And I'm very proud of the fact that my little boy grew up, became a captain, and actually flew me across the ocean to Paris. When the movie Band of Brothers came out, a lot of those veterans in Band of Brothers went back to Europe for a reunion and a celebration. And my son was the captain on the plane that flew those guys back to Europe. We went to Normandy and went to some other places where the guys had landed during World War II. But I'm very proud of the fact that my little boy grew up, became a captain, and flew me across the ocean. You can see the size of the engine of the 777. The right-hand side of that picture, the two of us are standing in front of the engine of a 777. Once again, they're the ladies. The admiral is the lady with the wide band around the cuff of her jacket. That's Michelle Howard. She's the four-star admiral. And these other ladies are military pilots. The one lady on the right, she actually flew the U-2 spy plane. And these others are standard military pilots. The lady in the upper right was a Marine helicopter pilot. Here are ladies at the day job. The day job was flying 130s, fuelers, but they also flew for United. These two ladies are flying the 747, a United 747. The lady on the right in the light blue jacket just retired as a three-star general. In this picture, she was a colonel, but she moved up in rank, and just last year she retired as a three-star general, a lieutenant general. This young lady flew for UPS. She flew the 767 for UPS, transporting those packages from, I guess, Louisville, Kentucky to different places around the country. But she flew the 767. Here's an instance where the captain, the first officer, and all the flight crew and all the flight attendants were black females. This shows you how things finally moved along, where the entire crew of the airplane, captain, first officer, and all the attendants were black females. Here's a father and daughter in the cockpit just for a photo opportunity. They didn't normally fly together. They could have, but in this particular instance, they were just there for a photo op. There's a flying club in California, and a guy named Lee Archer, who was our only ace, he had a flying club, and young kids got the experience to fly. Now, in this country, you have to be 16 in order to solo a plane. But in Canada, these guys went to Canada, and they were able to solo at ages 11 and 14. In 1943, these guys flew this thing from California to New York. It took them 42 hours to make the trip because you had to stop and tighten up the wires and put some more glue and gum on the thing and pass the hat for gas and oil. So back in the early 40s, they flew this thing across country from California to New York. The pilot and the mechanic, Thomas Allen, was the mechanic. This young lady was a fighter pilot. She flew she patrolled the no-fly zone in Iraq. It was an F-18 that she flew. But women were doing the whole thing. These are some of our general officers. Benjamin Davis, the West Point graduate. Interesting thing about Benjamin Davis, in 1932, he entered West Point. And 4 years later, when his class graduated, out of the 267 cadets graduating that year, Benjamin Davis Jr. was number 35 from the top. The 4 years that Davis was at West Point, he was silenced. No one was allowed to talk to him. They tried to force him to quit. So he got the silent treatment. Normally, two guys who broke rules had to do the silent treatment. But they wanted Davis to quit, so they enforced the silent treatment with him. But in 2017, they built a new barracks at West Point. Now, this guy had such a fantastic record as a student at West Point. The new barracks that they built in 2017 was named after Benjamin Oliver Davis Jr. They said he had the characteristics and character that they wanted to instill in the men, the graduates at West Point. So he was honored by having a building, a new barracks named for him on the campus at West Point. Daniel Chappie James was the first four-star officer of color in the Air Force. He commanded the entire North American defense system from the equator up to the North Pole. It was all under his command. Also, the communication system was under his command. From the equator up to the North Pole, Daniel Chappie James was the commander of the whole thing. Now, the highest award that we give is in the name of Brigadier General Noel F. Parrish. Parrish was the third commander at West Point, at Tuskegee. Now, Tuskegee Army Airfield was built for the purpose of training men of color to be pilots. But it was in Alabama, and they had it segregated. They had signs around the place, you know, colored entrance, white entrance, all that kind of nonsense. Well, Noel Parrish reasoned that, look, this place was built and it's here for the training of men of color to be pilots. Now, they should have the best possible surroundings. If you want them to be successful, they've got to have the best possible surroundings and atmosphere. So he reasoned that segregation was a hindrance to the morale of the men. So he ordered an end to segregation on the base. He said, there'll be no segregation on this base. If you don't want to sleep on this base or have your meals on in the club here, in the officer club or the mess hall, you're free to go in town and live and have your meals. And we figured that Noel Parrish is the person who made the atmosphere such that 992 men finished the flight school at Tuskegee. So the highest award that we give is in the name of Noel F. Parrish, because he made the whole thing possible. Now, they said that men of color couldn't fly and didn't have the courage. Well, here are astronauts. These are astronauts. The guys in white suits actually did a what they call extra. When the guys get out of the spaceship and float around in space, you just tie it on with a rope. Well, the guys in white actually did the extra, whatever they call it. They're floating outside the spaceship. We lost this guy. One of the ships blew up on takeoff, but he was there. We lost him. And another fellow we lost as one was re-entering. There was a problem with re-entry, and we lost one of the men doing that. You notice that the ladies again, 1, 2, here's Mae Jameson, a famous lady. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 female astronauts of color. So here we are. Here's the book that Mel and Dr. Kodosky wrote. Mel, you want to talk about that? Or is Dr. Kodosky, is he right there?
Yeah, I wanted to pass that off to Dr. Kodosky to talk about the book,
Okay.
since he was a collaborator with us of actually getting this book written. Dr. Kodosky.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Dr. Richardson. Good to see you virtually. And same with you, Mel, and thanks for everybody coming out tonight. You know, the book was Mel's idea. He came to me and we had a conversation, and I was able to get some students involved. And fundamentally what the book does is, as you can tell by the title, stresses the connection between Philadelphia and Tuskegee. Not only did the greater Philadelphia area provide more pilots to Tuskegee than any other city in the country, except for Chicago, it also provided some notable people. Dr. Richardson was talking about the chief, Anderson, that flew the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt. He was from Bryn Mawr. And one of his pupils, Roscoe Draper, the coach, also from the Philadelphia area, trained many of the pilots. So we wanted to emphasize the connection that's there and very vibrant, and you know, and it's a living legacy through Mel and the chapter. Second thing we wanted to do was emphasize that of the 16 to 19,000 people who participated in the unit, less than 1,000 were pilots, as Dr. Richardson pointed out, 992. And so we wanted to call attention to the engineers and the mechanics, and the book has chapters that focus on those individuals. And of course, the first chapter in the book is called Ladies First, because there were women involved as nurses, as parachute riggers, and the rest. And, even the name Tuskegee Airmen, that doesn't call attention to that. So we wanted to focus on those kinds of things. And we also wanted to make plain, as Dr. Richardson alluded to, World War II, for people of color, it was something that represented the potential finally for a double victory. I mean, African Americans, I teach military history at Westchester University. The first person who died in March of 1770 for this nation's independence was Crispus Attucks in an event called the Boston Massacre. African American. African Americans participated in the War of 1812, made up a sizable contingent at the Battle of Lake Erie, sizable contingent at the Battle of New Orleans, as you all know, participated in the Civil War, many other conflicts, and history didn't recognize those. And the double victory campaign during the Second World War was to recognize those contributions and defeat racism and fascism overseas, but also to defeat it at home. And Dr. Richardson and his colleagues had to fight for the right to fight for this country, often had to fight for the right to do their jobs once they were in the military. The bombing group, for example, never deployed because of racist commanders. They couldn't get out of the States. And then when the war ended, someone asked about Tuskegee. I mean, they had to continue to fight for civil rights, both in the military and in society. So the book does those things, which we think is unique. And the proceeds for the book go to a scholarship fund. So, we set it up, and the chapter gave out its first scholarships based on the book last August. So it's been wonderful to be a part of, and I think that's it, Mel.
So we do connect. We connect a lot with, like Dr. Richardson said, Delaware State University, Westchester University, and we support young people who want to pursue careers from the many fields that participated in Tuskegee, both for men and women. But we wanted to give you a highlight of the history of aviation, Tuskegee Airmen, and some of the things that we continue to do in order to support young people and continue to sustain the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. I think right now, and I know we've run over a little bit, I think there's an opportunity, and some people have questions which we can answer for you.
Hi, my first question that we have is for you, Mel. Where can people go to get more information about the flying lessons you were talking about? And do they offer recreational flying lessons, or is it all through this sort of grant scholarship program?
So there's two things that happened that we talked about. The first was the flight experiences for young people. So there are flight experiences that happen on Saturdays. We usually do between 2 and 4 throughout the year because you have to do them in the summertime and the early fall. That is free of charge. That's something that we provide for the youth. They come with their family, and that is geared for young people that are from 8 to 18. So that's recreational flying. They get to go up with a pilot. The other experiences that we talked about with Delaware State University. That is actual physical training. So the individuals are going to Delaware State in their aviation program, and they will end up with the capabilities of becoming a pilot. We've been fortunate enough to have young people start in our flight program, continue on and graduate from Delaware State, and are now pilots. They're actual pilots. So there is this continuum, and we wanted to make sure that we support them with understanding the experience, the initial experience, and also support them, as Dr. Richardson said. One student from Delaware State, we provide $3,500 scholarship to them in order to continue their flight and pilot experience. The other thing is, if people want to find out more about the information, they can go to our website, and there is a contact us section there where they can write in their question or ask about something, and we will respond back to them directly. And I don't know if I gave you the website. The website is www. T as in Thomas, A as in Apple, I as in Philip, PHILA.org. It's Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated, Phila.org.
Thank you. And I have just, for all of our participants, I have just linked the contact page on that website into the chat for anyone who's interested in that. We do have another quick question about another airman. We have a request asking, is Airman Nathan Thomas a member of your organization? He spoke a few years ago at the Dover Archives and had previously attended Delaware State in college as part of an Omega, I'm gonna say this wrong, PSI 5 fraternity. Yeah.
Yes, so Nathan Thomas is one of the original Tuskegee Airmen and is a viable part of our actual chapter. He does go out and do presentations and speaking engagements, just like Dr. Richardson and the others.
Thank you. This question is for Dr. Richardson. This person writes, my son has a question for you. What was your favorite thing about flying?
The flying itself was a favorite thing.
So Doc, can you give them some background as you got interested, how you got interested in flying?
I was a real young guy. My father took me out to this field, and I get out there and there are these things up in the sky buzzing around and turning and climbing and diving and rolling and so forth. And then when the things come back down, they landed and people got out of them. And that was the most astounding thing to me. These things are up there like birds and come down and people get out of them. And that's when I got the inspiration that I wanted to be able to do that. I wanted to be a pilot. So from then on, I was constantly doing things and thinking about things that had to do with flying. All because I saw this air surface, these 5 blackbirds. They call themselves the blackbirds. 5 blackbirds put on this air show, and I saw these guys do all this thing in the air and come down and land, and well, I was hooked after that.
Thank you so much. I thought you might enjoy that the person who asked this question responded back in a private message saying that their son is absolutely stoked for your answer. He was so excited for it. We have another question, and this goes out to all 3 of you. The question is, have you seen the movie Red Tails, and do you find it to be accurate?
Oh, I definitely saw it, and it's most accurate. It's based on our combat record. All the things that you saw in that movie are actually a part of our combat record. Our guys even caused a ship to sink. The fellows were coming back from an escort mission. They escorted some bombers up in Europe somewhere, and on the way back, they passed over the port of Trieste. And out in the harbor, they see this ship out there. It was a German ship, and had German markings on it. So our guys, there were 4 or 5 guys flying P-47s, and they started shooting at this ship. It was a German ship sitting out there in the harbor, so they started shooting at it, and the thing blew up. It just happens, it turned out that this ship was carrying torpedoes for submarines, and the 50 caliber bullets from our guys' guns caused some of those torpedoes to explode, and that's what caused that ship to sink. So our guys got credit for sinking the ship. No other squadron or group got credit for sinking anything as big as a ship, but our guys did it. Yeah, he can rest assured that everything he sees in Red Tails is actually a part of our combat record.
That's good to know. Thank you. Do either of you guys have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's.
I thought I would ask. We have a question. This one is for Dr. Kodosky. You spoke about it a little bit, but what drew you to the Tuskegee Airmen for a book, and what was your process like for writing it?
Well, we wanted, in terms of the process, the chapter is pretty good in terms of doing oral histories and things like that. And so, there was material. But I think the biggest asset was we had cooperation of many of the families who were able to share their stories, growing up with these people and talking about them as people, as parents, as people in the community, that I think really added depth to the story. And I think I just marvel at the notion of service, because again, getting back to that notion of double victory and, wanting to serve one's country and knowing the obstacles that are there, for you to not only do that, but then to sort of go back. I mean, some of the individuals that we talked to, they were really frustrated at the reception they got coming home, told they weren't qualified for jobs. As Dr. Richardson pointed out, they couldn't get jobs as pilots because of their skin color. I mean, can you imagine that? But they persevered anyway. They weren't defeated by that. They rolled up their sleeves and went to work in other areas. Dr. Richardson, for example, is an educator, and that's pretty amazing. And so it's an easy story, I think, to be drawn to.
And thank you so much for taking the time to help the rest of us learn that story.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
We have time for a couple more questions. I have 2 here, so if any more of our participants want to type in questions into your chat box, please feel free to as we keep going. So this is for Dr. Payne. You mentioned that part of your advocacy is for youth. What have you found to be their response to the story of the Tuskegee Airmen and women?
So the importance of what we do is we do things in a sequence. One is we tell the story, because many young people don't realize that they can continue to fight in life to be successful. And this story talks about individuals, as Dr. Richardson and Dr. Kodosky talked about, that even there were many obstacles put in front of these men and women, they continue to persevere. And young people when they hear these stories and actually see the individuals, I mean, we're talking about individuals that are in their mid to late 90s. And one of the gentlemen, Coach Roscoe Japer, is 101. The fact that they're able to persevere that long and still be healthy. I mean, I comment to Dr. Richardson and the others that I hope I'm in that great shape when I'm in my 90s as they are, because not only do you hear their stories, but you get to see them actually in person continuing to persevere. And the reception from young people has always been, I guess, their eyes open wide, because they're amazed that there are individuals out there that went through all of these circumstances and still persevere.
Thank you. We have one more question for Dr. Richardson specific. This person says, thank you for your service. Do you know any of the men pictured in the photographs in the Library of Congress taken by Toni Frissell? These would be the airmen who were stationed in Italy towards the end of World War II.
His microphone's off.
The men stayed in the bachelor officers' quarters. The last, I was at Lockbourne Air Base, now called Rickenback. But we had the bachelor officers' quarters at Lockbourne. And many of those guys lived right there in the bachelor's quarters. So I knew quite a few of them, yes.
Thank you for sharing. I'm just checking to see if there's any more questions. It doesn't look like there is. So if any of the participants at the end of this have any extra questions, feel free to email me and I can reach out and try and find you answers, or you can reach out to the link that I put in the chat, which is the contact form, to reach out straight to this organization. And with that, I want to thank not only our participants, but also our speakers for coming in, speaking and sharing your experiences with us, sharing your research with us, and sharing your time with us, and inspiring more people and more generations, and keeping this story going for years to come.
Well, thank you for inviting us. It's important that we get the opportunity to do this, and we don't get the opportunity unless you collaborate with us in doing so. Thank you very much. Thank everyone for participating.
When this virus goes away, perhaps we'll be able to come down to your museum.
Please do. And for all of our participants, please come in.
Yes.
We have the Tuskegee Airmen, Toni Frissell in Italy, up through the rest of the month. Otherwise, you can find the tour online on thebigsmuseum.com. .org. I was looking at a link sending you guys. That has a virtual tour of our exhibition, and I have also sent a link to our meditative tours without the guided walkthrough. So again, thank you everyone for coming and participating, and I hope you have a great night.
All right. Take care, everyone. Take care.